Hi, love me, love me, love me, love me, love me. Do you love me? Do you love me? Yes, love me more. And okay, and then you're like, get away. And they're still like, do you love me? Do you love me? Do you love me? Okay, beautiful, beautiful. I love cats and I love dogs. So if you are, that's kind of like attachment styles in 25 words or less.
Hi, my name is Yana. Thank you for watching. This episode starts with an audio introduction and continues with the video content. So remember to watch it until the end. And subscribe to this channel, leave a comment, share with friends. Thank you for being here and listening to timeless teachings. Welcome to the world of consciousness, human development, and full potential. Here we have conversations with people from all over the world about the subjects that matter for our mind, body, and soul, so that you can create a truly spectacular life. It is all about weaving the sacred, the soulful, and the ordinary into our everyday existence. Inhale, exhale, and let's begin. This is Timeless Teachings, a global podcast with yanafry. Relationships are at the core of our being. Creating safety within the nervous system allows our relationship to pleasure, sexuality, security, happiness, and higher states of consciousness to become the foundation of our connection with others. Today, I'm talking about these and other subjects with RussellPrice, a trauma-informed hypnotherapist and somatic repatterning expert. Let's welcome Russell.
Russell, it is such a pleasure to have you here with us on Timeless Teachings.
Thanks, Yana. It's great to be here.
I know we tried for a while to schedule, so I'm so glad we finally did. And here we are having this conversation. And the first question for you to tell us a little bit about yourself. So who is Russell?
Yes, great question. Who is Russell? I think I've spent most of my life trying to answer that
Aren't
question.
we all?
Yeah, totally. I can give you some details, sure, and some context. So I'm from Australia. If you are watching, then you'll notice that I have Asian features as well. My mother is Chinese, my dad's Australian. And if you're just listening, you'll notice that my accent is probably, I've spent a lot of time traveling around the world, and I'm also a hypnotherapist. So I can speak Australian if you want me to, but I tend to speak a little slower and clearer, because I think I've learned two things over the course of my studies and my travels. And the first is that if you speak slower, you have a chance to be more embodied with what you're saying, and there's a transmission that is able to come through. And then secondly, if you can speak clearly, then it gives the other person a chance to really digest and feel what you're trying to say. And so I think as I said, I can speak Australian if I want, or I can blur all my words together and we can have a chat like that, but it tends to go better when I speak kind of naturally and slowly.
And I appreciate it because it's also a global podcast, right, as we discussed before. Okay. And so definitely for people just to understand us better. So clear speech is very important.
Yeah, of course. And I've spent a lot of time in places like the Middle East, in West Africa, in remote places of Australia. I live in Bali now, which is a very global kind of town in Ubud. So yeah, I love culture. I love language. From as early as I could remember, I wanted to travel. And from as early as I could remember, I've also been interested in how do I reduce suffering? How do we reduce suffering as a people, as humans, as people that care for other people? And so I think I've pretty much devoted my life to answering that question of what's the best way to both release my own suffering, from perhaps a Buddhist perspective, just the suffering of being in this existence that comes with all of us as humans. What is this life about, really? And how then could I help others knowing and having done that? And so in brief, I studied just about every natural therapy under the sun in my early 20s. You name it, I would have done it. I ran a college of energetic medicine and healing for many years. And then I grew very, very disenchanted with spiritual teachings and spiritual teachers, and just felt like a lot of people were just either not living in integrity or the teachings were incomplete. And I left everything. I literally went out into the desert in Saudi Arabia. I used to teach, as you know, Yana, I'm sure that the personal development world is very female oriented, which is great. We all need to get in touch with our emotions, and I think women are just naturally more in touch with their emotions or able to express them. So I was used to teaching roomfuls of women and talking about emotional wisdom. And then I ended up in Saudi Arabia, where I literally wouldn't see a woman for months. And I wanted to test everything that I'd learned, and just to see what actually worked cross-culturally and across traditions, and what was it kind of at the core of helping humans. And after a very, very long journey, I'm starting now to return to teaching and sharing some of the things and the principles that I've learned. And I work one-on-one with people as I call it hypnotherapy. It's just a nice name to allow people to feel comfortable with what I do. And this is kind of what I'm doing now.
This is so beautiful. Thank you for sharing, Russell. And for me, it's also very interesting because we don't even know each other that well yet, right? We have never met in real life. So, thanks God to social media and just the connectivity of the world right now. So for me, it's also very interesting just to hear your story and to see how many similarities we have. And it always amazes me how people just attract people who are so similar in so many ways. I mean, and definitely part of your story about looking to remove the suffering for oneself and others, and studying, all over the world with all kinds of teachers and methodologies, and only eventually to become disenchanted with the world of spirituality entirely. And so these days, when people refer to me, oh, Yana, she's so spiritual. I say, I'm the biggest agnostic you probably will ever meet. I question everything. And, that's why I guess I know so many people, because I question everything.
It was a very painful transition for me, because my whole identity for a while was based around, being spiritual and being a spiritual healer. And I was kind of a new age rock star for a while. And at the same time, I just, as I said, I even noticed that a lot of teachers were just not in integrity with their teachings, or else the teachings seemed to be incomplete compared to, the promises of the workshops or the stuff that life will throw at you. And so I really, really had to drop that identity, that self-identity as a healer or someone who's spiritual, to try and find out what was beneath all of that.
And you're bringing up actually a very important topic, especially about teachings being incomplete. Because if we look to overall all the major schools around the world right now that we have in the society, I mean, teachings usually are coming from the old traditions, right? And it's usually it would be either something Asia or maybe Africa or Latin America. So, but usually something related to either yogis or tribes or shamans or saints, right? I mean, it kind of depends what part of the world you're from. And most of those teachings historically has been secret for all kinds of reasons, and many very good reasons, and not really revealed to the world. And what I also have been noticing, just because there are so many people who have been going around and trying to, find those answers and get access to those teachings, even if the teachings were revealed, they were not revealed to a foreigner in a complete way. And I have seen it just so many times in different schools when you talk to like those people who, for example, like lineage holders. I mean, those who really were born in a particular culture and grew up from a very young age in a particular school in a traditional way. And then eventually kind of the master or the teacher passes on, the teachings to them. So to me, also still that way, for those who are listening to us or watching right now, like if you do feel that you want this kind of guidance, I would probably recommend going only to traditional schools at the moment. Someone who have been there, for a very long time, and there is a track records and proof. And at the same time, and I'm sure you have also things to add about it, as people who live in the society, right? So we're not like reclusives, we're not sannyasis, we're not officially yogis, yoginis, even though on our Instagram there could be a cute picture and says, I'm a yogini or I'm a yogi. I mean, the truth is we're not. We're people who live in the society. Technically we are, but they referred as householders because we hold a house.
I love this term, the householder.
So whether we have family or not, work or not, it doesn't matter. But we are supposed to be householders.
Exactly. Yes.
Right. So for people like us who are looking for spiritual guidance of that kind of sort, I think it is always good to remember that first, it's important to choose someone who really knows, to your point, because many people, with all the respect, I still have to say it, especially I feel in the new age spirituality, teachings are not complete, right? So they are complete in traditional schools. Now, are you going to get access to them? Are they going to, really allow you to do this? Is another question. And then the other probably more important even question, still to remember that any traditional school comes with a dogmatic structure, and there's nothing you can do about it. Right. So it means that it's almost like there has to be some kind of common sense when you go and study, with all the respect, but you have to remember you're walking into a structure, and some elements work, some don't. And you have to figure out which ones work and which don't.
100%. Yeah. It's a very, very interesting time, Yana, because the traditional structures which we might have had if we'd grown up in a traditional society are no longer there. We are in the new age, which means that you can do anything and you can choose anything. You have all this choice, which is both wonderful because it means you don't have to be locked into the dogma, say, of a traditional teaching. But it's also a challenge because we're kind of like, as Thich Nhat Hanh says, we're falling. The bad news is you're falling. The good news is there's no ground. But it can be very disconcerting to, and the mind wants something to grasp onto, to say that, I am a yogi, or I am a Buddhist of this particular tradition, or I am I'm a psychotherapist. And I think one of the things I've had to make my peace with was this sense that, as Thich Nhat Hanh says, I am falling. I don't actually know where I'm going. And sometimes it can feel like it's dreadful, and sometimes it can feel like, oh, I'm flying. This is absolutely fine. And to find a teaching or some kind of practice which allows you to hold the paradox of, I think any teaching which allows you to embrace and hold paradox without getting too fixated on one particular thing is going to allow you to navigate the large degree of change which is happening in the world. We're in the Kali Yuga now, apparently, which is where everything is starting to fall apart, including all the structures from the past. And so from that basis, how do we navigate this time? It's and I love this term, the householder, because it's very true. Any spiritual teaching or any practice or any workshop really needs to help you wake up in the morning, be able to put your pants on and greet the day with a continuing smile, no matter what life throws at you. And we all know life throws at us a whole bunch of random crazy stuff, no matter how many affirmations you say, no matter how many mantras and crystals you burn and how many incense sticks you hold in your hand, etc. and you know what I mean. Life has this way of challenging us at every point. And I think that's one of the measures of your practice is, how swiftly can you return to your center? And if crystals and incense helps, then I'm all for it. And if there's something else that I can offer from my bag of tricks, or that from other traditions, which is useful, then I'm very much about embracing all of that. And I think the latest teachings around trauma and nervous system regulation are just wonderful, and something that I use a lot in my practice because they're just so effective.
Yes. You actually mentioned several interesting things. I just want to, highlight a little bit. Like one, it was about how that mindset that you're falling to fly pretty much helps them to deal with changes of life. I mean, and look what is happening in the world, especially since 2020, right? I mean, before, of course, we had changes and the world was moving, but now it just quantum leaped. And even people who maybe by nature were more sort of traditional oriented in the mind and maybe not that into anything around wellness, let's say it this way, but it is personal development, professional development, psychology, hypnotism, right? Or spirituality, let's say wellness overall. So even people who were not into that, I mean, now it feels like everyone is into it because everyone understands that how much we need health, mental, physical, emotional, energetical. To your point about practices that you use about regulation of the nervous system, which is super powerful. And I also see now it's becoming like really popular because it is so effective. And then also, at the same time, it's like what he said about the practice. Whatever practice we are doing, you have your practice, I have my practice. People who are listening to us have their practice, or maybe thinking about learning a practice now after listening to us, right? But then, and really, like I always feel that it's important to give people this opportunity to see what is available in the world. And that's also the largest intention for this podcast, just to show to people what exists, what people teach, what kind of people there are in the world, and then they choose what resonates with them the most. And then whatever practice we have, just as you said, then in the real life, that's when we test it. And I remember when I spent a lot of time in the Tibetan monasteries with lamas and monks and rinpoches. And it was very interesting always for me. I still remember how one of the teachers said, well, all this chanting and visualizations and some of the Tibetan practices could be really intense. Like, right? Buddhist practices it could go for hours and hours and hours. And it requires a lot of stamina to just be focused and concentrated. And I remember how we completed just one of it was 2 weeks, maybe almost no sleeping, very intense practice. And then at the end, the teacher was like, well, that was just a preparation. So exactly, this is how you train yourself, And now when you go into your real life to deal with your children and your spouse and your business partners and your clients, that's where your real practice begins. And we just all loved.
Oh, I love that. Yeah. Because for me, definitely spiritual practice, whatever that is, however you define that, needs to permeate and support the rest of your life. As you said, the conversations we have with our partner, our sweetheart, our children, our business partner, this is where the rubber meets the road. This is very much where you will see the efficiency and the effectiveness of your practice, or not. And it's always the test. I had a thought about monasteries and from a nervous system point of view. And I've not spent a lot of time in monasteries. I have done vipassanas and spent some time in ashrams. What I notice is that the ones that I've spent time in have been very structured. So there's set meal times. There are often set practices for you to do. And sometimes there can be silence or, a very limited kind of amount of contact. And over time, this I see is just a wonderful antidote for the way that our nervous system gets upregulated in normal society. Like, for your system to know it gets 3 meals a day and you're going to eat them, and you're going to eat them slowly, you're going to get regular amount of sleep, you know exactly what you're doing and where you're going to be staying. There's a huge amount of stability and safety in that environment, which then allows you to do the inner work and to build the framework of your energetic awareness, because safety and food and warmth and shelter and other people are all taken care of. But when we're thrust into the real world, especially if you're managing a family, or you're an entrepreneur, or you're just like sitting back on the internet going, what the fuck happened to the world? It's very dysregulating. We don't know what's happening next. We eat food on the run. Our friendships and our relationships tend to be kind of diluted by the busyness of life, and all of these things which naturally support us are just not so available anymore. And I think all of this has a really big impact. We wake up and wonder why we don't feel so great. It's some of these basic things that are missing that make an impact. And that's sometimes with my clients, that's some of the first things that we do, is just get the basics in order. And then they go, oh, my relationship with my spouse is just so much better. I'm having such great sex now, or I'm just meeting the kind of men or the women that I like to meet, because you're not compensating for this dysregulated nervous system.
So let's talk a little bit more about that, right? So for people who are listening to us right now and who live, let's say, in the society, and what you said, constantly perhaps bombarded with the uncertainty, what are easy, simple ways that they can do to create this foundation to actually help nervous system to regulate itself?
Right. Yeah. Well, the classic thing is that we all know what to do. Okay, so the things I'm going to say to begin with are no surprise. I was, and many years ago, Yana, I was going to write a book called A Cup of Tea, A Lie Down, and a Good Poo.
Good. I love the title. I think you should still write a book, Russell.
I think I should still write that book. So basically, if we break it down, a cup of tea, pardon me, make sure you're hydrated. 3 to 4 liters of water all day, every day. Before you make any decisions, sit down and have a cup of tea. It makes such a big difference. A lie down. So make sure, if you are underslept, and pretty much anyone I think who lives in a big city is going to be chronically underslept. And sleep hygiene is very poor in most modern cities. But I tell you what, you can, again, we all know that feeling of like you go on holiday, or you go on a retreat, or you go to a monastery and you feel great afterwards. And one of those reasons is simply that you're getting enough sleep. Like, sleep is amazing. So what would happen if you just prioritized sleeping for the next week and just resting or napping anytime you felt tired? Now, obviously, if you have kids, a business, etc., that's challenging, but so is continuing to live your life in this chronically underslept condition. And so it's like, can you choose yourself? Can you choose to continue resting? So getting enough rest, first and foremost, is huge. And then doing a good poo. So that involves basically eating the right foods, and having good elimination. Just making sure that, and I tell you what, this is something that's taken me an embarrassingly long time to learn, but I've worked out, Yana, that most of my neuroses, most of my anxieties are actually due to the fact that I'm just not eating enough, and I'm not eating enough protein. Mm-hmm. And it may sound strange to get some nutrition advice from a hypnotherapist, but I started counting my macros, okay, counting calories, which is something I swore I would never do.
Mm-hmm.
But it has been a game changer because I realized that I was just simply not eating enough. And because I've been running around doing so many things, I've lost connection with the natural hunger signals in my body. And when I started just having more food, I actually lost weight and I felt better. And I'm like, this is, how am I still learning how to feed myself after, all these years on the planet? These are the basics. If you are going through something challenging, if you're going through a divorce, a breakup, a business challenge, a health challenge, if you're just trying to get ahead in modern life, if you can get these three things sorted, then half of your problems are going to disappear. The other half, you will be resourced enough to actually make a meaningful decision about. And I think that is just so important. And then if you can't solve the problems that you're facing when you're rested, when you're well fed, and when you're well hydrated, then that's the point. Then you should go and seek some help, because you will also be able to receive that help and action that as well. But it starts with the foundations. And, as I said, I think we all know this. This is not rocket science, but, we get so busy with why are we not doing these things? So I guess if it helps, and I'm reminding anyone out there, we all need to be reminded, myself included.
And thank you for doing that. And again, to everyone who is listening to us or watching, guys, it's a bit like, I think, going to the gym, or any exercise. You kind of know you have to do it, but then the question about doing it.
That's right.
Right. So the same here.
Yeah.
And actually, it's interesting, so much spot on with food, and especially about protein. I had a very similar experience because I also went, to do health check and everything. And they said the same thing, that overall, absolutely healthy, except probably not enough protein. And in this case, also, ironically, not enough fat, like oil, or ghee, or like some butter. So, because those are also very important for the cells rejuvenation and for the brain, right, largely. So I feel like with modern, eating, and just a disclaimer for everyone once again, even though you said it, we're not nutritionists. Yes, however, it is from the live experience.
Exactly.
Yes, and especially I feel in the spiritual community, people tend to not eat enough protein. With, vegan and vegetarian. And of course, everyone can eat whatever, we feel is good for our body. But it is just when we look, for example, at vegetarian people who grew up in the vegetarian culture, to my point that sometimes teachings are not complete. Even with food, the idea, let's say if someone says, I don't want to eat meat, again, for whatever reason it is, fine. But then do you actually know how to feed yourself with enough protein?
Oh my God, I was the worst vegetarian.
They don't, right? When I look, let's say, for my mother-in-law, for example, who is Indian and she's vegetarian by birth, she never had meat in her life. She has probably 500 recipes how to add protein into her every meal because they grew up with this. And most of us didn't. And so that's why it's just so important to remember those simple things, which are important.
100%. I was the worst vegetarian ever. I would be vegetarian, think I was awesome. Around 2:00 in the afternoon, I'd just be gassed. I'd be so tired. And then I'd eat cakes and donuts and carbohydrates and just ride the insulin up and down. And oh my God, it was so, it was just bad for me. And again, I also I want to totally respect everybody's choices. I live in a town full of vegans and vegetarians. And it's, I what do I want to say? Of course, listen to your body and experiment. And this is just what works for me. And it has really worked wonderfully because as I said, half of my anxieties and my emotional turbulence has just evaporated when I've actively added more protein to my diet.
Absolutely. And I also love, I heard one of the therapists and psychotherapists saying, which is like, it was like a famous announcement somewhere, almost like a joke on social media, that he kind of laughingly but truthfully said that almost 80% of his clients who have significant improvements when it comes to anxieties or like even depressions and this happens simply because he asks them to eat breakfast.
100%. 100%. Yep. I remember going through a dreadful breakup. Oh my God. It took me like a couple of years, and maybe we can talk a little bit about relationships.
That's actually where I was heading to, exactly.
Yeah, for sure. But I'll definitely add this in. It took me 2.5 years to kind of get over this relationship. It was just agonizing. And for a long period of time, I would wake up and just be thinking of her and wondering what went wrong and wondering if I should talk to her or wondering how I can solve it, blah, 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 blah. And what I realized was that as soon as if I got up out of bed and I had breakfast and I went for a little walk, most of that emotionality would disappear. And I'm like, I'm just hungry. I'm just hangry, but hungry and emotional. And you can do the shadow work, and you can do the affirmations, and you can listen to the meditations and all the blah blah blahs to try and law of attraction your way out of these things. Or you can have a smoothie and go for a walk, and life is better. And goodness me, having done so much self-inquiry, I am just so enjoying this alternative, which is just eat more.
Absolutely. And also, since you started, and that's what I wanted to ask anyway, because I know that you write a lot about it and you also talk a lot about it, right? So let's dive into the relational aspect.
Yeah.
And there's like so much we can talk about in this area.
Where do we start?
So maybe let's start with, what do you feel is really important in the relationship to have it as a truly nourishing experience for everyone involved?
I love this question. It's such a deep one, and which goes straight to the heart. I've been teaching a lot of women how to do 3 things. And these 3 things are kind of drawn from my experience and my teachings and the teachers that have taught me. So it's not necessarily traditional dating coach stuff, but I also kind of aim to address what it means to be you, because when we get to that place, the relationship tends to take care of itself. I mean, if I teach you how to set up your Tinder profile and how to chat with people over SMS and how to set up a date, I can absolutely do that. But if the foundation and connection to your heart is not settled, then all of these things will just kind of exacerbate what is already unsettled inside. So there is a couple of really key skills which I find either lacking in a lot of people or is just missing in terms of the refinement of how they do this. And the first one is mainly around resolving conflict. Okay, and this happens on the inside. It's an internal practice and an external practice. And what that looks like is this. And on any given day, let's say it's a Monday, you wake up, your friend invites you out to a party on Friday night, and you say, yeah, that sounds great. Okay, or an art gallery opening or something. And what you've done at that point by saying yes on a Monday is you have signed your future self up for something without its consent. Okay, you've just signed up your future self and said, we're going to go. We all know this feeling. Come Thursday night, you're exhausted. The last thing you want to do is go out on Friday night, but you're in this dilemma, right? You promised your friend that you were going to go out with her. So that's one part of you wants to be in integrity and honor your commitments. And the other part of you is like, oh my God, I'm so tired. I need to rest. I'm not going to enjoy myself. I want to cancel. Okay. We've all kind of had this experience. And so there's some there's both some internal conflict between these two parts, and there's potentially external conflict, okay? Because if you say to your friend, yes, I'm going to go out, you're going to feel like you've betrayed yourself. And if you say to your friend, actually, I can't go out, you've kind of broken an agreement which you made earlier. This is life. Welcome to real life, okay? And the way that we deal with this situation, both on the inside and on the outside, is a great indicator of how you're going to navigate the complexity of being in a relationship. If you're listening and you're single, you have a problem, which is you're single. But I tell you what, when you find a partner, and you will, there's a whole other box of problems which are going to open up, okay? It's not like being in a partnership solves all your problems. So this basic skill of how do I listen to parts of myself on the inside which want different things and find an agreement whereby I become more integrated and connected is part of the skill. And then when you can do that on the outside, what happens is that conflict between people becomes an opportunity to actually grow closer together. And then you have a great chance at building a relationship which gets better over time instead of falls apart. Okay. So there's a whole process which I teach around this, and it involves a lot of, how do you communicate, language and skills, kindness to yourself, listening. But essentially, when I ask women to write down what's on your wish list for the perfect man, okay, because we do the list exercise, we write the list. I get it.
Exactly, especially when you want to manifest something, right?
Yes, that's right. That's right. Now, when I do the list, I do it in a very, very different way. Once people have written down the things they want, but we start, okay, great. First of all, let's definitely start by writing down what it is that you want. And I say the only non-negotiable is this requirement that you and your partner have the ability to disagree and then to come back into connection and be closer than before. And if you can do that, then it doesn't matter what happens in life, whether you agree or not, because at the end of that disagreement, you're going to be closer. You're going to understand each other. You will have listened to each other. You will have acknowledged that the other person's point of view has a wisdom and a positive intention. And when you can embrace that, you grow, they feel accepted, and you become closer together, either on the outside or, as I said, with these parts on the inside, these voices, which often give us a lot of suffering.
And the way how we go through conflicts, or the way how we come back together, is also depends a lot on the attachment style, right? And I know that you talk about it. So
my God.
Just at least, have shared a foundational explanation to people. For those who might not know, maybe heard about it, not quite sure what it is. So what is the difference between the attachment styles then in the relationship?
Oh, yeah. So attachment style, oh my God, we could talk for days about this, Yana, and it's one of my
5 minutes.
I love it. So attachment styles in 25 words or less, there's cat people and dog people, Yana. There's cat people and dog people. That's all you need to know. Avoidant people are cat people. They kind of come in when they want. They're adorable and you want to pet them, and they might let you pet them. And then they'll disappear and they'll just go. They won't even announce that they're going, they're just gone. Dog people come up to you. Hi, love me. Do you love me? Yes, love me more. And and then you're like, get away. And they're still like, do you love me? Okay, beautiful. I love cats and I love dogs. So if you are, that's kind of like attachment styles in 25 words or less.
This is so good, Russell. I never heard this one before, but it's so true, actually.
Brilliant. If you are a dog, if you're a dog person and you're with a cat, it's going to require some adjustment. If you're a cat person and you're a dog and you're with a dog, it's going to require some adjustment. This is just And what I've observed over the years is this is kind of universal. Okay, so I'm gonna, how do I say this really simply? The anxious attachment style is generally more with women. That's not all women, but it's generally, women are generally a little more anxious and men are a little more avoidant. And hence we get these stereotypes at the end of the spectrum of men are emotionally unavailable because we don't talk about our emotions, and women are too much. Okay, you're just a bit too much for me. Okay, and what the gift of each of these, let's talk about the gifts. The gift of the anxious attachment style, the part that is always going, do you love me? Do you love me? Your gift is that you're the one that makes a stand for intimacy and connection. Okay. You are always wanting to create more connection and intimacy. And this is a beautiful and necessary, deeply rewarding aspect of yourself, like to celebrate that. If you are a little more avoidant, okay, that means that you like space. You tend to prefer to process your feelings by yourself and then present them to your partner as this is what's going on. And your gift to the relationship is that you are there making a stand for sovereignty and independence, which is also so necessary, because if you have two people leaning into the relationship, you become codependent. Okay, you can't do anything without the other. If you have two people who are too avoidant, you just never see each other, and you think you're fine, but we just never see each other, right? So it's like, are we actually in a relationship? So when you can appreciate what the other is bringing, because here's the thing, Yana, in relationships, especially if you've studied a little bit of Tantra or you understand polarity, the anxious and the avoidant is simply polarity. You know, there always needs to be one that's pulling away so that one can chase, okay? Because that's magnetic. If you're both leaning in, then the polarity dissipates. If you're both pulling away, well, it never happens. So if you can first and foremost learn to appreciate your attachment style, you know, maybe I'm a little anxious, and instead of thinking that's a bad thing, remind yourself that I'm the one that is encouraging and wanting this connection. You can bring that gift in its fullness. And if you're a little avoidant, instead of shaming yourself, I skew avoidant. I'm a little bit on the avoidant side, and I've shamed myself for that for such a long time until I've started to realize, oh, I can celebrate this. I'm bringing something really necessary to the relationship. Attachment styles are deep. They're hardwired into us from a very young age. To an extent, and I don't want to have this sound negative, but to an extent, they may never change. Okay. And even though I work a lot with the nervous system and the unconscious mind, I'm also very humbled by the power of our attachment styles. And then the choice becomes not how do I fix myself, okay, but how do I make art out of who I am. And this is a completely different mindset. You know, a lot of us come into spirituality, healing, self-help with the idea of I'm broken, I need to be fixed. You know, I'm too emotional, or my heart is too hard, whatever. But this different kind of more compassionate aspect of like, you are who you are beautiful and loved and worthy of love as you are. Knowing that, how do we make art out of your life, out of the things that you have intrinsically got inside you? That's a much better question and leads to a much happier life and a lot more fulfilling relationships. So yeah, I hope that was useful.
Thank you for sharing. That was very insightful. And as you were actually saying it, you know, what I realized, it's funny how I feel that almost a lot of issues in the society come because we are conditioned to approach each other in a way which is almost opposite to our natural wiring. Because, for example, as you said, that statistically, men tend to be more avoidant and women tend to be more anxious. But when it comes to dating, men supposed to chase women, which is exactly the other way around. The avoidant style supposed to chase the ancient style, and the ancient type of person is supposed to pretend that they are not that interested, and then they come together and they get to know each other. And 3 days later, she's like, why didn't you call me? Because it comes back into this original wiring, which then makes me fundamentally question what it is with our society, where there is such a large conditioning on us to be just not who we are. Or it's like, like with this another joke when they say with, let's say, married couples, then when two come together, and I mean, especially when it is man and a woman, as saying, because it's stronger, it's probably when it's expressed this way. But it's the same way, of course, works, for people who come together, man and a man, woman and a woman. But the joke was about man and a woman that are more masculine and feminine, right? Maybe better this way. So when they come together, then the feminine, after the marriage, she kind of hopes that the masculine is going to change, and it never does. And the masculine hopes that the feminine will never change, and it does. and that's what creates conflicts.
Oh my God. When you can learn, so back to my point before, when you can gather the skills to navigate conflict so that it brings you closer together, then all of these conflicts, all of these challenges become just food for your spiritual growth and for deepening connection. And that's the foundation of a long-term relationship. That's really the key. And that's one of the key things that I work with people around is like, how do we resolve this internal conflict? Because once you learn those skills, and you learn a little bit of languaging and authentic relating, then your relationships become so much fun. And you develop this deeper sense of secure attachment.
That's beautiful, Russell.
Yeah.
And yes, we are coming soon to an hour of the conversation. So I think that as much as I would love to continue, and probably I feel we're just getting started. So we record part 2 and go deep, into all the relational aspects. So we're definitely going to do that. I think it's going to be fascinating. And yet for today, I'm just going to ask you the final question for you. With everything that you experienced and your dating life, what have you learned the most about the relationship?
Oh, that's so interesting. So I'll tell you my most recent lesson, which is include your partner in all of the decisions that you want to make. Oh my God. Because so as a man, as someone who skews a little avoidant, and autonomy and freedom actually makes me feel really manly, which then makes me more attractive to my partner. But there were certain things that I was doing where I was not including her, and I thought there were little things like, I'm just going to go to this place and I don't need to tell anybody that or ask permission. But she got anxious. It made her anxious, which then I have to deal with. And so what I realized is the more that I include her in those decisions, the more actually she can both support me. She's not there telling me I can't do this, but then she can support me. And then she feels more settled as well, and everything gets better. So I think that's one of the recent things that I've learned and managed to internalize now. And then finally, the broadest overall thing is listening. Like the more I listen without needing anything to change or to be different, and then validate what my sweetheart is saying, this is like just a fundamental life skill which will change every relationship in your entire life. It's just one of these hidden superpowers. And I think it's one of my superpowers as well. I'm a very good listener.
Thank you so much. And that was Russell Price on Timeless Teachings podcast. Thank you everyone for joining us today. Please remember to follow us on Instagram at The Timeless Teachings. And we're going to see you next week.
A gentle reminder that this is not a regular podcast, because here we have no rules and no scripted questions. All conversations are spontaneous, unfiltered, and real, with people from all over the world, regardless of their race, religion, nationality, skin color, language, or social circumstances. The intention for this podcast is to showcase the infinite variety of how human beings think and what they do to create happiness, fulfillment, self-realization, health, wealth, legacy, and overall, a truly spectacular life. Did you enjoy the interview? Feel free to share this episode with friends, subscribe to the podcast and YouTube channel, and follow us on social media. And remember, you are the master of your own life.